And so the point of saying is like AI you can replace your thinking. And I think that's a big fear for people of like, you're just not critically thinking anymore. You're just doing whatever model you're using is telling you to do. Or you can augment your thinking. You can add to it. It becomes this like, as opposed to just transmission of information, it becomes transformation through the information. And I think that's why I'm so optimistic about this, is that if you use it in the right framework, in the right context, it only enhances.
Kris Puckett has been a part of some legendary design teams. He's shaped products at Facebook, Dropbox, Mercury, and now Shopify. But some of you may know him from his time co-hosting Epicurrents alongside Dan Petty. We cover a lot of ground in this episode. Kris shares what he's learning about the future of design leadership, how to make the shift from being a people manager to a player coach, what to do after bombing an interview for your dream job, and why sticky notes in your portfolio just might be career suicide. I had a lot of fun hanging out with Kris, and I think you will too. Here's my conversation with Kris Puckett. Well, Kris, I'm so grateful for you taking the time to do this. In fact, Kris and I really are kind of getting to know each other a little bit through this show. Yeah. But we have a lot of context for each other and a lot of mutual friends and stuff. So yeah, anyways, Kris, I'm just really excited to get to do this and would love for you to share a little bit about yourself for those that might not know you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, super honored that you asked. This is inaugural first podcast. I don't do these things often. So I was really grateful that you reached out and was stoked that you're on this podcasting journey. I've loved seeing the other episodes and kind of digging into how you do these things. So I really appreciate it. Yeah, I feel like kind of sum of things up pretty quickly for me, in that I like to have kind of core identities that I tend to follow. And one of them is that I'm a resilient optimist. And so it's a key part of my worldview and how I try to like interact and engage online and in person, and like try to be as authentic as possible between those two spaces. I'm a stoked dad, which is such a key part. I've got 2 little girls, and it drives a lot of like just my day to day and like why I work and what I do to be there for them and have that. And then, yeah, and do you have kids?
Just one, but
that's right.
We have a little girl that she turns 2 in just a couple weeks, actually.
Oh my gosh, great! Every age is like the best age, but 2 is so fun. Got a 2-year-old right now, and it's so fun to see. And then, yeah, professionally, I'm a design manager at Shopify right now. I've been in the design leadership space for a couple of years, made the switch over, and it's been a huge gift to be part of that. And that's kind of like the 3 things, like 3 areas. I do a lot of other stuff on the side, really big into like fitness, really big into like reading is a huge passion. I'm working on some side projects that I'm really excited about. One is called Epilogue. It's an ambient reading companion. This is not a pitch for that at all. It's not even out there. It's mostly just for me, but it's just like a fun thing to kind of work on. So yeah.
Yeah, it looks very cool. I would love to someday get access to it. I used, I think it's called Oku, if I remember correctly, for the name.
Okay.
At one point, it was like kind of like a Goodreads competitor of sorts.
Yeah.
But it had some similar features to what it seems like you're building with Epilogue.
I'm hoping to have it like test flight ready in like a month or 2. I wasn't planning on releasing it to people. I was just kind of sharing it just because it's a fun thing to like, you're building stuff, and it's kind of a whole new world for creativity. So, but I have been super just grateful and honored by the response that people have had with it. So it has made me encouraged enough to like, all right, I'll put this out there. Like, let's just see what happens. So yeah, I'll let you know. It'll be fun to see what your feedback is.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm just going to follow this line here, because I think like you switching back from design management and leading to like actually building a bit yourself was something that we talked about. I even saw it was a senior design leader at Shopify shared something on LinkedIn about talking about like moving away from abstractions and things like that in presentations and stuff, and vibe coding and things like that are kind of becoming new ways of doing that, and even getting less abstract than a Figma design might be. And so I'm curious for you, as somebody that's been in design leadership, but maybe not as hands-on in design, building yourself. What's it been like switching back into that mode of building and designing and getting to do it for fun rather than for maybe stakeholders, which I'm sure can be fun also. I don't want to say that,
Yeah. Sure.
but it's just different, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. I think it really came about 2 years ago, year and a half ago. There's all these buzzwords, right? And like 2 years ago, it was craft was like the big buzzword. And now it's taste this year. But there was this push. I remember reading from like, she was at Figma at the time, but Jenny Wen and a couple other design leaders who were essentially just saying, look, like the people manager side is going away, right? The pendulum is swinging from like it was, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Like if you were an excellent people manager, you would be very successful at some of these companies. And it's kind of switching back now to like not just the middle, but even closer towards like you need to be kind of this player coach. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be like taking on individual projects, although it depends on the company. But I think I had such a resistance to that because I love the people manager side, and I was like, why would I like? It sounds awful. Like I don't want to do that. But then the more that I thought about their advice, and then I had this kind of little sabbatical time last year that I took off, and then I was job searching and stuff. I started just playing around with new tools, and I got really, really big into AI like a year and a half ago, and seeing where the space was going. And then these tools have unlocked like such an aspect of creativity that I had wanted to explore for a long time. So it's been a lot of fun. It doesn't feel scary, and I think it's been pretty helpful in like core work at Shopify as well. Like it is a big part of our role to vibe code and to use these tools to their fullest extent that we can. So having these like personal experiences where now I'm like using, Cloud Code and going through and like my favorite platform, Perplexity, and all these different pieces to utilize to create this thing that's been in my head for a while that I would not be able to achieve without them. And it's something that has felt like a massive unlock. It's raised some existential questions, if I'm honest, around like what exactly it means to like build and create, because it's not as though like I'm not feeding Claude a ton of Figma files. It's more so just talking, like writing it all down, and which is fine. I love to write. So there's something like very powerful about that piece, but it does raise like, who's actually doing the creating, right? It's Cloud Code. They're the ones like it's building the actual code base and stuff. And then I'm just giving a ton of feedback. It works out in my favor that this is a big part of my day job is to like see designs and talk through it with people and like unblock problems and questions. And so it's like a natural fit. But yeah, engaging in that pendulum swing has been great. And it's funny that I was so resistant to these more senior folks who are like further along in their career going like, hey, this is where the world's heading to. And then I'm like, yeah, no, this is where the world's heading to, and I have to like catch up fast. So it's been good to have.
That's such an interesting perspective. Man, I feel like I could go so many different directions with that. So, because that's kind of like what you've walked through has been enjoying that maker manager transition a little bit, and now it's kind of pendulum swinging back a little bit towards maker. But the way you described it as player coach, I'm curious to just hear you share a little bit more about that, especially since you mentioned, or well, I guess we haven't mentioned it yet, but you've been called like the Ted Lasso of design, things like that. Yeah, what's it been like trying to make that transition and swing back into things that you were resistant to? Has that been challenging, or did it feel kind of natural?
That's good. Yeah, great question. I think it felt more natural, mostly because it like stress is a great motivator. And so it felt like, oh my gosh, I'm stressed that if I don't adapt to this like new reality, that, seeing the landscape, like last summer, late spring last summer, I was looking for a new job. I took some time off of, previous roles, and I was going to explore like maybe a different career path, and realized actually like want to get back into this, and I really love the design leadership. And it turned out there were not a ton of design manager jobs available. Like it was super competitive last year. And I was public about like sharing some of the struggles, and I was public about the struggles mostly because I like knew I was not alone in that. And we so often see just so many like silly posts online of all these people's successes, and like I'm making 50K in MRR now, and look how great I am. And you're like, that's cool. Like, I'm really struggling with like being anxious about what's going to happen. Like these interviews suck. And like I bombed, I had a really great start to the interview process with Figma, and I bombed the presentation so bad that like I didn't go forward with it. And you're like, okay, like I've got to learn from this. And so there were these moments of like was pretty publicly sharing about it just because I knew that I wasn't alone in it. And has become a very good motivator to like step into these new worlds and realities because I don't want to be in a spot where I'm being left behind or like I'm resistant to some change because I want my own picture of like the career as opposed to just being open handed with it. So it hasn't been as hard for that piece because I just want to be in a spot where I can like grow, be successful, contain, keep keeping things going and not look for another job. If I'm honest. And then, yeah, so that hasn't been a big deal. The player coach thing, I think, is just like a phrase that gets thrown around a lot of when you've got leaders who you're very in the details or you're into the details in various ways. Some are really great. Like there are some design leaders out there that are in every pixel every day. And I tend to try to avoid that because it feels a little overbearing, but I still have daily rhythms of seeing where Figma files are at and like knowing what feedback to give and what levers to pull. And then there's times when I need to jump in and like actually make something or make a component or make a thing that could help for presentations. It hasn't happened as often at a bigger company, but it's happening more and more recently, which has been fun. And then the side project is really just like a lifelong dream to build my first app. I think when I got my MacBook in 2005, I got an iBook G4 and I was like, I want to make something for this. And so I go to Barnes and Noble and I was like, I'm going to look at books. Like, how do I build software for OS 10, which is what it was at the time. Tiger is what it was. 10.6, maybe 10. Yeah. And then I realized very quickly I was not smart enough to do that because you have to know like object-oriented programming and Objective-C and Cocoa and all these different frameworks that I was like, I don't know what any of this means. This is not going to be a thing. And then 20 years later, I'm here making this iPhone app like it's real. It's awesome. So it's been fun to like have those pieces. To call out your piece on the Ted Lasso thing, it was like a previous like team statement. Someone had made it on a previous design team that I got to lead. And I took it as a compliment. And now I'm like being removed from the situation. I'm like, how much of a compliment was that? Were they making fun of me? I don't know. But I took it as like, I thought it was a really cool thing to hear. Like I think it's the character. Yeah, I'll own it as a compliment. That show came out and it was such like a touchstone moment in a time like I feel like we all needed that, especially that first season. But I happen to love like the character arc and his growth and stuff. But that first season was just like such a breath of fresh air that it didn't land with everyone. And I think it kind of fits my personality as well. That like I know there are people that probably rub maybe the wrong way with like some of the quotes or cheesiness or cornballness that I can bring. And it was just nice that there was this like public figure that everyone loved and not like kind of being compared to. It was cool.
Yeah. I mean, as a resilient optimist, it would make sense for you to take it as a compliment, even if they didn't intend it as one.
Yeah, like
I think that it was, definitely.
Appreciate that.
Which, I mean, you've had a lot of history of like reinventions and stuff, which even not to keep going on the Ted Lasso thing, that's kind of a lot of what he was doing was reinventing himself as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just, you've had a lot of different transformations in your life. And even just like, I mean, when I was looking back over your background, I was like, wow, I did not realize how many companies you were at that were just like transformative to the design space, like especially like digital and user interface design. I was blown away. I mean, Treehouse and Vision, Facebook, Dropbox. I mean, what has that been like to work at so many different companies? And now, I mean, you describe Shopify as like a legendary design team. They absolutely are. I remember when Polaris, I think that's what it was called, came out like 8 years ago, something like that. I feel like it's still getting referenced. I still think about it. And, it's like a really initial strong design system that's so many people were referencing before that was really a thing. Like, what's it been like just being on so many amazing, maybe controversial certain ones, I don't know, but legendary teams, to work with?
I think it's a huge gift. I don't want to overstate like, some of the teams that I was on, like Facebook was a really fun project. And that was like, I have it, like I worked there for, a handful of months and then COVID hit and some changes happened I was remote and just kind of everything all at once. I was also contracting at the time, which I liked better for them anyway. Like I didn't the full-time thing felt a little scary. Like I had my feelings about Facebook. The project that I was on was this really cool like misinformation campaign, and it
Yeah.
shipped
And
and
it
like
was like during an election interference and things like that, right?
yeah. So got to like test this idea. The funny thing, looking back now at Facebook as well, is there were so many different teams working on similar things, and I think that like the humbling thing about this work in this industry is that you're building ideas of previous ideas. Like you're just remixing a lot. And a company like Facebook, you're not creating like net new. I remember one of the first like design reviews, I introduced yellow as like a like, hey, what if we use this as a warning sign? And it was just like immediately shot down. Like, Mark, everyone just like either Zuck or Mark hates yellow. We're not doing yellow. It's not a thing. Okay, cool. Good to know. Like I didn't know that there was like, these cultural pieces there. But essentially I'm just remixing someone else's like little bottom sheet that slides up and has a button. And so it's a funny thing to say like, oh, I got to work on this stuff. I did. And it's humbling to realize like, it was really, it's other people's work that you're kind of starting off like remixing, and it maybe solves the problem. And like, that's great. And we can move on. Working at Envision was fascinating because I was in it was just a weird time in the company. Like it was skyrocketing, and Envision's impact on the community was, it's undeniable of everything they did. I think for design, like I think a lot of people forget that Envision was pushing design as this like, key part of creation of software and technology. And like, you need to be part of that, from the Design Better podcast and the resources that the Design Better team put out to all the community initiatives. Envision was a huge supporter of Epicurrence, and that really like helped Dan and I have several really successful events through that. And then, and it was because they cared about the design community. So like that was a big part of that. I happened to be in the wrong role. I was a community manager for them. And I think I think everyone realized after a while of like, I'm very good at a lot of things, and like relationship building is one of them. But to be programmatically creating community is a very different thing.
Yeah.
And so, and then Envision had like a pretty wild burnout. And so it was fascinating to see like this meteoric rise. And then when I left was like the start of this massive decline, and like, layoffs and all the things that had happened. And I was kind of at the start of that like layoff season. And that, it's tough to see. So yeah, I feel really lucky. Dropbox was wild. I planned on staying at Dropbox for a long time. And then I had an opportunity to become a design manager at another company. And that felt like the right career move, just because I had been so much more interested in the people leadership and coaching and mentoring, and like, how can I like scale a team, and how can I help people like grow, and how can I help pull out their superpowers. And so that was an opportunity to jump on. Whereas at Dropbox, it would have taken a long time to get to that space. And so I felt like opportunity cost of kind of switching around. But yeah, to your point, like I feel very lucky that I've been at a lot of these like key companies throughout. And then I'm very lucky to be at Shopify right now. Like, just feels like a legacy company. It's been around 20 years, and yet it still feels like very like fresh and growing and new. And it's still,
Definitely.
In the space, and they're not like resting on, previous success. So that's great.
So cool. I mean, and not many people can mention Dan Petty just as a first name like you did, really casually. What was that like, being a part of the Epicurrence community? You mentioned the community manager role at Envision maybe wasn't the right fit for you, but also you were involved in a lot of relationship building and community building with Epicurrence and things like that. How did that even come about?
Yeah, I heard Dan on a podcast with Brian Lovin and I think it was Design Details and Bryn Jackson. And I remember hearing this podcast in like 2016, 2015, and the way that Dan was speaking, there was like a shared language, and I was like, oh my gosh, I like love this guy. Like, who is this guy? And because I was relatively new, I had switched careers, and I had kind of been building up like my portfolio and my career in the Denver area. But obviously, there was a much broader world out there in tech that was all centered in San Francisco at the time. It still is, really. And then, so he's out there, he's doing this podcast, and I just felt like I got to reach out to him. And so I'm not super shy. I'm pretty like extroverted in person, and don't really like get super embarrassed about just like, hey, like we should chat, we should be friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of struck up a little like Twitter, dynamic. And then Dan was just, I think most people don't know this about Dan, that he's like an unbelievably generous person. Like behind the scenes, like he would kill me for saying this, but he just gives away so much. And so I really couldn't afford to go to the Epicurrence that the first one I got to go to was in Tahoe. And so like I got sold a bunch of artwork and I was just like hustling so hard to try to get the money to go. And he was essentially like, look, if you can just get here, like you can pay for like half the ticket, I'll cover I'll cover you staying here. But if you're cool, just like sleeping on a couch in an Airbnb or something, we'll make it work. I was like, heck yeah, like that sounds amazing. And I show up and I just noticed like there was so many people and it was just him running the show. And it was just a vibe. And it felt like I could just maybe start helping in any way I possibly could to kind of make it smoother. So that's what happened. Like we just started doing things. And then we kind of became really fast friends and again, shared dynamic and language and worldviews and stuff that really worked out. It turned out like it was a really good partnership that like kind of played off each other really well. Like the things that he really loved doing, I wasn't as good at. The things that he was good at but didn't love doing, like I actually did love doing. And so we were able to kind of like work that into, and then I think we did like 13 of them together, 12 of them together. Yeah. It was probably, it was life changing. One, because of just the amount of like new friends that I got to meet was just unbelievable. And then the like impact that a week together could have with these different groups and seeing, like best friends are made, people like get married and they have the other, people they met at Epicurrence, like at the wedding or officiate the wedding. And like, it's it's wild the impact it had. So what was it? Yeah, it was life changing. And Dan's become one of my best friends, and it's a huge gift to have that. So I feel very fortunate. I think sometimes you just need people that like open doors and just kind of take a chance. And I feel like Dan took a chance on this like really goofy designer from Denver who was like way in over his head and kind of helped me level up in a lot of areas.
Did that do a lot to really build confidence? I know you have talked a little bit about like times when you would kind of qualify being a designer, like especially early in your career when you're transitioning and stuff. Like, did that really build a lot of confidence? Just not even necessarily just becoming friends with such a well-known designer, but being in that community, seeing other people's journeys, how they ended up in that space and career. Did that build confidence and help you start to feel more like you belonged a little bit more than maybe you might have thought you had at that point?
That's a great question, Nick. It built confidence from a relational standpoint, that I felt like I had people that I could ask questions, look up to, like made some really good friends from it. And that turned into like help with whether it was, job search or design feedback or coaching, like it absolutely helped. I think to this day, it still feels like there were people where you're like, I have no business being in these conversations, like no business, listening to like talking with like Mark Hemian or Josh Puckett or Katie Dill or like these just kind of legendary figures in the design community where you're like, you were so much further along and like light years more talented than I am. But that's cool. Let me show you this like cool little like landing page that I just designed that is actually really crappy. It helps in some ways. I think in other ways it kind of accentuated like how far of a talent gap there really was. So it was like motivating to try to like close that. Uh, I think after a while, then it kind of all that faded away the more that we did it. And it just became about the mission for Epicurrence and like what we were trying to achieve, which is not a conference. It's really about building relationships and connections. And it became this incredible like vehicle for, time for people that like our industry, and you probably know this too, like can be a weird industry. It can be very like lonely and isolating. It's very performative. Like people are always comparing, you like big comp packages. It's just like a bubble that outside of the tech bubble, people don't live like that. And so can we provide a space that feels more real and authentic, that people feel like they can get up and share some of their story in a raw way and make connections in ways they didn't have before. And so that gave me more confidence to just like live that out and embody the work.
Has it even shaped a little bit of just your philosophies on design leadership and what makes a good manager, a good coach, a good coworker?
Yeah, it has. I just get a chance to meet so many amazing leaders. Like I, had a chance through all of those to meet people that I would never have had the opportunity otherwise. And then you get to hear their stories and pick their brain a little bit, or, make friends with, people that are just further along. And that's always a huge gift to have that. In terms of shaping it, I think it really highlighted what I love, which is like the relational side of things and being able to like see this kind of a phrase that I picked up from a mentor years ago. It was called like invitation and challenge, and that became a key thing in like Epicurrence's language too. Of like, this is an invitation to get community and be part of something. And it's a challenge to like let down your walls a little bit. It's a challenge to do stuff that you haven't done before. It's a challenge to like go scrape your knees while you're rock climbing or get lost mountain biking and need to pick up. And that has helped me. Like I wouldn't say I'm at all a great manager. I think there's some things I do really well, and there's a lot that I do very poorly. And so Epicurrence I think gave me a ton of different frameworks and seeing how others did it, and then also again just having those relational components where I can reach out to people and be like, hey, this happened. Any tips? Any thoughts? Has been a huge gift.
Interacting with so many amazing leaders yourself and working, I'm sure, through Dropbox, Mercury, Shopify, all these companies with probably really great managers and leaders. How have you adapted some of the principles for how you lead and manage? Has it shifted between each of those companies based on kind of the culture, or have you been able to kind of find your style or your personality? Maybe it's not the right word as like a design leader, but just, that flavor of how you approach it, and it's been able to be consistent, or have you had to adapt and shift and change a lot over the years?
I mean, I think ultimately, like, you have to be constantly changing and adapting. I think that so it's helped because I get to see how, say like someone like Katie Dill has probably had to change quite a bit in her career. And I don't know her as well as I know some of the other managers, but I just remember hearing her like speaking in a few Epicurrences and just being kind of blown away by that. Or, there's a manager, director, design leader that I've become close friends with. His name's Devin Mancuso. He's at, well, he doesn't want to share like the company he's at right now, but he was at Dropbox for a long time and at some other, I was at Google before that. And he is just very like he's very focused on the craft and the product side. And so I've learned a lot from him over the years of like how you maintain that level of like high craft and those standards while empowering the team to do it. It's like you're not doing it for them, but you're really like holding that bar. So there's definitely like huge pieces to learn and adapt from that. I think I have found that I'm just like the ultimate personality hire for a company. Like that's so self-deprecating, but I feel like I have found my like more authentic leadership style, which is to be like relational first and like knowing that these ultimately these are people that are trading hours of their life for financial compensation. And yes, they're doing work that they're excited about, ideally. Yes, that they're like using their skill set well. And all those like pieces line up to be the right fit for a company in order to like achieve the company's goals and like, make a difference. It was really hard to work at companies that didn't have more of a mission to them. So Shopify is actually like, feels like a great fit because it has more of a purpose, which is just enabling anyone to become an entrepreneur and use the internet to like change their life, which feels very in line with things that I care about. And so it's easy to have that relational dynamic come out of like, I care about these designers, I care about the team, and I care about like what we're actually trying to achieve. And so that lines up really well. But I have had to learn a lot from a handful of these other people around, like, you can't just care for people. Like, you have to still have the outcomes and the results, and like, you have to make hard decisions. And how do you, how to handle interpersonal problems with people? How do you handle performance problems? Like, all those kind of things. It's not all like sunshine and roses, right?
Yeah. Somewhere in my color coded books back here, Unreasonable Hospitality is back there.
Yeah.
And that book did so much to shape, or not even shape, but like give words to things that I thought or saw emulated in different companies of, like making the charitable assumption, I think is one of the phrases that he uses, or, just being able to hold people to a standard while also being able to be kind about the fact that they probably have things going on not at their work life that are actually
Yeah.
affecting their performance, and
Yeah.
doesn't really do much for their performance either if you're rude and uncharitable to them about that and assume that they're not trying to do a good job,
Yeah.
Yeah, anyways, I guess this is a selfless plug for that book. I
No,
don't
it's a
have an
great. Yeah.
affiliate link or anything, but
You got to get those going,
such a
man.
good one.
Yeah. No, go for it.
I was gonna ask because you've been probably working remote longer than some folks have. I think over 5 years now, if I remember correctly, from what you mentioned on our last call. Is that right?
Yeah, since 2016.
What's that been like being maybe a little bit of like a forerunner? I don't know, I guess for some of the teams you maybe joined where you'd been at it a little bit longer, so maybe you even knew a bit about how to build some culture and cohesion with teams, or you at least knew what you hoped for in that experience from a company. Like, how's that shape some of how you think about your approach to like building
Yeah.
community and things like that in distributed teams?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, foundationally, any sort of community is you have to be intentional, right? So, like, and it's a fight to get there. And I think that we in 2025 have lost some of our fight in us to maintain relationships with intentionality. And that shows up in like, one-on-one dynamics with friends or people in your life. It shows up in, whether you go to some sort of faith community and like how you engage there. It shows up in how you engage with your barista that you see on a daily basis if you go to a coffee shop. Like the intentionality is such a key part of community, and that translates to like companies that do remote well are deeply intentional around the relational dynamics at the company, so that they're not just focused on the once a year big like hurrah of like let's get together and do this offsite. Like that's fine, it's a temporary boost, like with the dopamine hit of like being all together, and you get these like positive fun connections. But in the moments in between that week, whatever companies have for their offsite, how are you being intentional about the people that you're reaching out to? Are you like genuinely concerned, caring about their lives? Do you remember their details around, how they're doing, spouses, partners, kids, things that matter to them? Are you engaged in? So in the 9 years now that I've been remote, one, I'd say it's turned me into a little bit of a like feral animal. I feel like it'd be really hard to go back into an office.
Yeah,
And I would probably just feel like claustrophobic after a while.
funny.
It, uh, yeah, I think like the key thing that I've taken away, and I've seen companies that say they do remote well and not do it well, is that you have to have leadership who's bought into being intentional around it and then setting the
Yeah.
culture for that. But when you're like, if you've got executives who like couldn't care less and they think community is like a stupid thing or they don't really care, like on a long enough timeline, it will tank the culture, and you will see the results of this. You will see teams who feel like burnout, disengaged, who just there's unhealth because you're setting the standard for them that it's not important. There's speaking of books, like I don't have an affiliate link for, but there's a book by David Brooks. It's called How to Know a Person. And I picked it up. I don't even know why I picked it up. Like I love people and building relationships. It doesn't feel like I didn't pick it up out of deficiency. I was just more curious, but it was fascinating because it really kind of gave a primer for people in this new world of like, how do you care and become friends? How do you like know a person well? What do you have to do to get there? And so much of it boils down to like, do you authentically care and engage intentionally with the people around you? So long-winded answer, I think that remote cultures that do it well are deeply intentional about it. And there's this like base level care and concern for the person first. And then that will, like, if you invest in that, the belief would be that the company would feel that, right? Apple used to have, it may still have this like phrase, but at Apple, our people are our soul was like a huge thing for them for a while. And it felt like they really actually believed it. Now, I don't know if that's like still true or people at Apple still feel that, but I think like the working out of that, like if you really fundamentally believe in your people, that you follow your soul, you'll put the intentionality into it.
Yeah, you have to want like more than just the outcome of a healthy culture. You have to be
Right.
willing to like put in the sacrificial steps as a leader that can
Fun.
create an environment where a healthy culture can thrive. And then you can enjoy the outcomes of it. But if you're not willing to do it, it's going to be really short lived and
Yeah,
not really
100%.
last.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious to talk a little bit more about like design leadership.
Mhm.
And just like, especially, I mean, AI, which, you're optimistic about AI. I think a lot of people, even people that I think speak ill of it on LinkedIn and stuff like that, which I feel like is every other post, like want to believe that it's going to be a really great tool and want to not fear for their jobs, but see how it can make them more resilient in their craft and things like that. But I'm curious. I don't know how much you can share about like how Shopify's engaging with some of these tools, but I'd love to just hear a little bit about like your personal perspective on how you're leaning into different AI tools. I'm just curious like how this is maybe shaping some of that for you, but then also like how it's taking shape and form at Shopify, knowing that those are probably two different things, even though there's some overlap between probably your
Yeah.
personal take and the company's take, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a lot closer. Like the Venn diagram's like pretty tight, pretty big of my own like views on it, and then the company views on it. Uh, our CEO like made a little bit of a like waves of we released this memo in the spring around AI usage. Like people at Shopify are being measured on their AI usage. It's like it's no longer a nice to have; it's a requirement that you're engaging in these tools actively, and whatever that looks like for your daily workflows. That worked great for me because I was already using a lot of these tools in different ways. I had been, I think we're coming up on like 3 years of 2.5, 3 years of paid like Perplexity Pro membership,
Nice.
and because like I just found so much value in the tool itself. Fun thing, funny thing about the AI stuff is that there are legitimate concerns. I think like an optimist is not blindly positive. Like we're realistic about the state of the world. It's just that I think on a long enough timeline, like things can work out for the best and for like health and wholeness
Hmm.
with AI and people's usage of AI is that like it really is an augmentation. It's not a replacement. And if you're fearful about being replaced, to me, that tells me that there are areas that you're not challenging yourself in to grow. Right. And like that is a key part of, I think, like the fear that people have of like, I don't want my job to change. I can't let it change. And AI is going to change this thing. And it's like, it could change it for the better. You could rework your entire day's workflows of how you engage with the content or whatever it is you're doing for the better. A great kind of example for me of this is that, and again, I shared this a little bit earlier, but I had this like lifelong dream of building an iOS app, right? Since like my first iPhone, and I mean, I was late. I couldn't afford like an actual iPhone for until like the second, I think it was 3GS was my first iPhone. I had an iPod Touch when those first came out and before the App Store. And I remember my first iPhone app, my first app was the Bible app because I was in seminary and it was like stupidly expensive. Looking back now, it's like $40, which now we're like, oh my God, who would pay $40 for an app? But that's what we did. And I was like, one day I've got to be able to do this. I got to figure this out. And now, like, I'm halfway through this journey of building this like very complex ambient reading companion because reading is another key love of mine. And I read to understand the world around me. I read to like connect to my emotions and like people and places. And it's such a powerful tool for me. There are books that I read that like I'm not that smart. And so then I have a billion questions. And previously I would have to like take notes, right? Or I would pull out my phone and I would take notes. And then with AI, like I can have Perplexity open and have like a space open in Perplexity for each book. And then it keeps track of the questions I have. It's like giving me a deeper understanding of the reading or better context and stuff. And so the point of this whole point of saying is like AI you can replace your thinking. And I think that's a big fear for people of like, you're just not critically thinking anymore. You're just doing whatever model you're using is telling you to do, or you can augment your thinking. You can add to it. It becomes this like, as opposed to just transmission of information, it becomes transformation through the information. And I think that that's why I'm so optimistic about this is that if you use it in the right framework, in the right context, it only enhances. I think people's fears about having their job replaced, like certainly understands, like no one wants to lose their job. I think it's clear from like ChatGPT 5's kind of bomb of a launch that we're not really that close to like any sort of AGI, yet. And maybe that'll come like eventually, but it feels very much like certain car and social media CEOs and owners feeling like their fully autonomous vehicle will be complete, and they just keep pushing the timeline out. I think we'll just keep pushing the timeline out for a few years. So there's reason to be optimistic that it's just going to keep enhancing and augmenting.
Do you follow Carly Ayers at all?
No.
Probably enjoy her take. She's a design writer. I think she works at
Okay.
Figma. She was kind of comparing this to like, she's essentially saying like, designers, we've been here before. Like, this has happened with every other form of like innovation that's come in design technology before. And she called it like the rise of the super IC, or individual contributor, for those that don't know that term. And yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about, because it's kind of been like there's always been these things where there's a push to either generalize or specialize or learn this tool or learn that tool. And it's kind of just another tool to learn currently. Like you said, like who knows how far around the corner it is to being able to more fully replace some of the complex tasks and stuff that we're doing. Like you said, I keep coming back to like, I don't think we're there yet. So like, how can it augment and supplement and actually help you perform your current role better and help you do more of the things you actually got into design to want to do
Yeah.
And I'm curious if that's even some of how either you've tried to approach it, or even how maybe Shopify is, if the overlap is as big as you said, in the Venn diagram. Like, is there a openness to like allowing people to choose how they want AI to impact their roles and how they utilize it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is a little bit more ambiguous right now. If you follow our newish chief design officer at Shopify, his name's Carl Rivera. He is, he's been posting a little bit more about like our Shopify internal culture and like what we're doing, which has been interesting. It's cool to see him like disseminating that internal stuff externally. So I think that there's still kind of this idea that like it can help us change. There's this corporate speak of like local maxima versus global maxima, right? And so like the idea of like you're on this like tiny hill now, you gotta get to this like global, this big mountain. AI can help kind of shorten the gap, like that distance between there, faster. And I think that's like true. I mean, I had some stuff come up a couple months ago, 6 weeks ago, where I ended up opening Cursor and just kind of vibe coding some solutions and some ideas and some concepts, and that helped spark bigger conversations for the team. And I wouldn't have been able to do that necessarily in Figma as fast. Like, I feel like I'm pretty fast at Figma and designing there, but in terms of actually getting like real data modeled into this thing, like the prototype would have just been this spaghetti monster that just wouldn't have been as like easy to do without that. So I think it does help, quite a bit in terms of how people are like measured on using it. I think it's still a little open ended of that. Like we're all kind of figuring out this new reality. So I'm not entirely sure about that. I can't speak to that just yet, but I think that the designers' fears, to your point about the Carly, I think you said her name was
Carly.
Yeah, like the printing press freaked a lot of people out. Like it was a big deal. Like every time there's this big technological like revolution, or there's a famous like historian theologian, her name is Phyllis Tickle, and she came up with the idea of this like super cycle in history, that kind of every 500 to 600 years there's a super cycle in humanity that is a massive shift. And she's not the only one that's kind of come up with this theory, but I think she popularized it quite a bit in the 60s. And we're kind of in that right now. Like we're in this really unique phase of human history where we have these tools that are letting us do so much so quickly and fool a lot of people so quickly. Like there are some things to be kind of afraid of. But overall, I think like we'll figure it out, just like people figured out the internet and figured out telephones and cameras and every other piece of technology that's kind of changed our perspective on things.
Well, I'm curious, kind of on that note, to maybe end with just like, as somebody who's gone through as many transformations and reinventing and shifts and pursuing different things, it seems like you've done a great job in your career of just like paying attention to yourself, but also paying attention to what's happening in the industry and in the environment around you to be strategic about the steps and moves that you take and way you work to improve yourself in different ways. And I'm curious, like, to give advice, if you have any, to people that are out there trying to navigate the job market. It's a tough one. And they're trying to determine the future of their career and how this technology is working and things like that. I'm just curious if you have any advice as you've navigated similar.
Yeah, I remember last summer, kind of middle of July, I was in this final round for like, it was between me and another candidate for this kind of dream job. It was like a director of design job at this writing company. And I was so beyond excited about it. And I felt like I had a really good shot at landing this thing. And I didn't get it. And I remember just like the heartbreak and the anxiety from it. Because you get so close, right? And then like this has happened a couple of times where you get really far in the interview cycle, and then for whatever reason, the market shifts and like the role got canceled, or again, like people, like it's competitive. Like there are people that are far more experienced and better, and like I was punching up for sure. It would have been a risk for them. And what I ended up looking back, when you get a job, you're like, okay, I didn't need to borrow as much suffering as I was borrowing in that moment. Like I really could have taken a few breaths and like, yes, this sucks, like feel it and then let it pass. I tell my daughter all the time, like just like feel our emotions and let it pass like a cloud in the sky. And I could have used that advice more. Like, okay, like there are more opportunities out there. Like, what can I do? What can I learn from this? What can I tweak? Constantly be questioning. Like, if you're struggling in the job market, and you mentioned like transformation a couple of times, and I think maybe like alluded to some of it. But the thing that has made me resilient is just knowing that like I have survived every bad day. Like all the worst things that have happened so far. Like I'm still here and I'm breathing, and like that is something like I take a lot of pride in. I guess it is weird. Like I feel very lucky that I'm still here breathing. So I have to remember like these bad days are not going to last forever, despite what it feels like. For the job stuff itself, it's just constantly learning what we could tweak. I remember after I bombed this like Figma presentation, and we had kind of a lot going on, like daughter's health and hospital stays, and I was just like in this tough spot of trying to navigate personal life. And I had this interview in the morning where I showed up, and I just wasn't in a good headspace to give this presentation.
Wow.
And the presentation like wasn't as good as it needed to be. And it bombed it so hard, like I said earlier in our chat. And looking back at that though, like it was a great experience because I redid my entire like portfolio, my presentation, like how I was framing things, how I was thinking about things, and kept like, okay, this is an opportunity to like redo this. And it became more successful because of that. So I'd say like reframing some of those pieces. You're not alone. Like people that are struggling in the job market, like it feels very easy. It's so tough scanning LinkedIn and you just see so many of these like green circles on people's profiles and like the struggles that they're having. But ideally, like we'd be there for each other. So yeah, anybody listening, if I can help in any way with job market stuff, if you need like portfolio reviews or, companies that are hiring, like reach out, let's figure out how we can help.
Yeah. If you have any resources, I can add them to the show notes and share those.
Exactly.
I'm curious too if you have any maybe advice for people that are trying to figure out thoughtful ways to integrate AI into their workflows without losing the soul of their creativity and their critical thinking skills and even just thinking for themselves. Like, what are the ways to augment more than replace, like you were saying earlier? And what are some ways that you're seeing, even in your team or just at Shopify, that it's been really effective or valuable, that it's been integrated into different things?
Yeah. Okay. So a couple parts to that question. The foundational piece for not losing critical thinking is like the hope would be that there's a baseline of critical thinking to begin with. And so that's one thing that maybe like not being able to teach super quickly. But I guess the question is like, if you're using a platform like Perplexity or ChatGPT to get answers about factual things, it can be very helpful. Like I used it personally quite a bit. I've got this AC system that's kind of acting up. And so I took pictures of like all the different components and like, tell me about it. Tell me about my house. Tell me about these pieces. And then like, what am I missing? and then it can give these questions, and then I'll have to like think through that. But it gave me more ammunition when I'm talking to like getting quotes for repairs and things. Then there are other pieces where I'm having it analyze my writing or having it analyze my own thought processes, and I'm pretty weary of like taking it super seriously on a few of those pieces. And so the question is like, okay, so here's its response. Do I think that's true? And it's constantly asking like follow-up questions like, do I think that's true internally? Is this right? Does it fit? Does it fit? I think that's like a key guard that we can't lose of like, this is not like they're going to hallucinate. We see this a lot in people that are having a hard time not questioning whether like they're just pattern matching systems. And like there's another piece that if you really want to utilize the AI systems well, it's understanding the actual like foundational tools behind that. Like in no way am I an expert on LLMs and like what they're doing, but I have a base understanding of what's happening behind the scenes. And that helps me understand too, like it will make mistakes. In terms of like key workflows, like I said, I mentioned, being able to empower like deeper reading through, asking the questions there has been really helpful. Creating through Cloud Code and using these tools to like create something that's in my head has been great. Be really patient with it. I constantly have to like refactor and rebuild and like yell at Claude of like, what are you thinking? Like, this is the fourth time I've told you not to do this. But the people that I think are going to be really successful with like vibe coding feels like a dirty term right now, but the people that are successful with actually like getting their idea out there, I think are the ones that are really patient with the system of like, okay, it's not there yet, but I know that I can get it there with enough iterations and not give up. At Shopify specifically, it's tough to say. I think that where we're seeing a lot of on the design side, just the rapid prototyping, which I think is far better. Like starting off in high fidelity, it's a hot take. Like I think lo-fi wireframing has a very specific place, and so much of it feels performative. Fully against. I love whiteboard as an agency, but like as a tool, like whiteboarding can feel very performative. It's like you drew it on a whiteboard, like sticky notes. Side note: do not put sticky notes on your portfolios. If anyone's listening to this and they have a sticky note on, like a picture of sticky notes on their portfolio, please take it off, because every design manager that's like more senior or executives will judge you for the sticky notes on your portfolio.
There you go. You heard it here, folks.
I'm telling. It's just a fact. What it just says is like, you're
I have ideas about things that I can't execute.
Yeah, and it's just like you're newer. It's just like you're posting stuff that's like inconsequential. The assumption is like, I don't care how you got. Like, it is helpful to see the math. Like, show me a little bit of the math, but it's not vital for like your portfolio to have that in there, because I'm assuming you did some like thinking in some deep fashion to get to your.
Yeah.
So
it says I couldn't show any work that was visual. That's actually what I want to show. So I'm going to talk about how I did work and thought of it.
I'm going to do it. Yeah, I drew these like little boxes and I said it was a button, and you're like, cool, great, awesome, congratulations. That's why I feel like performative whiteboarding happens a lot too, with people doing that. So getting to like higher fidelity faster with real data mocked up, like I think is far more valuable for seeing the ideas, and then being able to send out like a link to this prototype. It's not a Figma file where you only have specific interactions, but like the whole thing is technically a coded little micro universe app. Like it's real, it's live, it works, for the most part. Now maybe there's like uncanny valley situation where it's not exactly, at the quality bar we would ship, or there's some things that are a little different because it doesn't fully conform to the design system. But it gives you enough of a sense of like a tangible thing that I can give real feedback on, because it feels more lived in. And I think that's like far more valuable. And so we're seeing that coming out. And like I said, our CDO, Carl, on Twitter posted this video about like not having, decks for presentations. Like, show me the thing, show me what you built. Yeah. And so that being able to like quickly vibe code, your idea, using our design system, using the tools that are available, it's going to go a lot further for the team than a slide deck with static screen. So lean in and do that. For specific workflows, like there's a couple of people I love following, but also just get really inspired by seeing people's work. So like the Perplexity team, always inspired by what they're doing, especially like visually on a brand standpoint, because they're using Photoshop and other tools, but for the most part, like they're doing a ton in Midjourney to like create these assets and these visual pieces. And so, yeah, that's kind of Did that answer your question? Making sure I
Yeah,
nailed it.
my like 4 questions. Yes.
Yeah, I was trying to keep it on. No, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, which this is the problem. We're talking about really fun stuff, so I could easily just keep going. So maybe last question, this will actually be my last question, hopefully, is has it created like more shared language or connection with engineering, or is it frustrating to engineers to receive a like vibe coded prototype? You know what I mean? Like, does it increase connection and collaboration and create moments where like, oh, there's better shared understanding and perspective earlier. And so the meat of the thing that's being built or the strategy and the goal can be discussed and you're further along in the conversation? Or does it create maybe some new barriers by already having something that far along, you know?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on the team and the quality of the prototype that's happening. At no point should anyone think that, I mean, I'm trying to make this like Swift UI app that's like production ready, but for a company at scale, like we would need engineers to take the vibe coded solution,
Yes.
refactor a lot of the code into like, actual usable code, right? It is writing like React Native and it's doing the thing because that's what our design system is built in. So Cursor is doing the thing. I think engineers do have a positive feel towards it because one, we get to see the limitations and the edge cases a lot faster because you're like playing with it. You're like, oh, actually, like this
Hmm.
interaction is really slow, or like this doesn't make any sense right
Yeah,
now because now I've clicked it like I'm doing
that's
four
good.
clicks as opposed to like on the screen. So there are things that speeds up for them in terms of conversations. And it is technically usable code that you're handing off. And so I did have, a really fun conversation with my counterpart who's director engineer, one of them, on this like vibe coded thing that I was making. And he was stoked about it because it got us to these conversations far faster. And I think that's a key piece of that. We're speeding up like execution. So like that gap between idea to launch is, so key. And then the like principal engineer who is going to take over like building this thing out, he does have a workable code base that he can go to. It's a lot cleaner than just a Figma file where he's starting from scratch and he's like importing components and then refactoring. So there is a piece of it that's nicer for them, but I think it depends on the actual like team itself and it's nuanced for sure.
Chris, it's been so fun talking with you.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks,
for
Nick.
taking the time to do this. Uh,
Absolutely.
is Epilogue going to one day be available to me and others? Or are you thinking,
Yes. Yeah. I'm hoping by like end of September I'll have test flight invites, hopefully sooner. But yeah, right now I'm like knee deep in my like ambient mode system is such a key part of the app of being able to just like open it and speak to it and have it do what it needs. So like the pitch is, right? If I can really quick. You've got a book, it's ideally for physical book readers, but if you've got a Kindle, I suppose it would do the
Mhm.
same thing. You open your phone, start a session on Epilogue, you just tell it what you're reading, and all this works right now. And then it just waits for you. There's no like wake words, there's no like, hey, voice assistant, do this thing. And it'll take quotes, notes, and ask questions. And the stuff that I'm working on real time right now is the real time processing of being able to answer your questions real time using different services. It's all built on Apple's intelligence and framework first. So it's on device models for a lot of the needs. And then if it's not able to do what it needs on device, it'll send it out to a service like Perplexity, or you can bring your own API keys and connections that way. But the idea is to like have this ambient companion to deepen your reading experience. Because even if you're reading like, there's fiction books, you're like, I love this idea, I love this quote, or I love this character, like tell me more about this.
Mhm.
It's a way to catalog all that quickly without the distraction of stopping what you're doing, picking up your phone, adding it in, and then trying to pick back up where you were reading. So we'll see how it goes. But yes, hopefully end of September, beginning of October, I've got like test flights out. I'm hoping to get the landing site for signups out in a few weeks. So I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, please do. That sounds so
Yeah.
cool. So it's you speak to it and that triggers the ways that it's like kind of cataloging and remembering things about what you're reading, or does it have its own database of information on books that it's like also pulling from and knows those plots and stuff?
I mean, it's going to be pulling from like whatever book you add in the library. It'll be contextually aware of what, so right now in my like app that I'm using it for. I've got a few books that I'm reading. I just started reading The Odyssey because I want to read it before Christopher Nolan's movie comes out. But again, I'm not that smart, and so there's a lot of times I'm like, I don't know what this means. Who's this character? What's going on? And so I can ask it while I'm reading, and I'll categorize that. It is multimodal, so I do have like a little input bar that if you don't want to talk aloud, because if you're around other people or whatever, maybe you don't want to be that guy that's like asking questions to your phone. You can just like quickly type into it; it'll do the same thing. But the idea is to have this like ambient experience that's just out of your way. So you're not feeling distracted. It's not pulling you away from the reading experience. And then, I've had some like questions around like, why wouldn't you use ChatGPT? And it's like, yeah, you could totally do that. This is just a way to like consolidate all of that into one space where you've got this like ever growing library of books that you're reading, of like quotes that you're taking, notes that you've got, questions that you have. And I've got like future ideas of how you could start making connections between all those questions and like recommending things like, hey, you really loved, this book like On Quality by the guy who wrote And in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Yeah, Robert Persig, I think is his name. So he's got a book called On Quality. And it's like, oh, you love this book. Maybe you'll like these other 3 books. Like there's ways for us to do that, but it'd be private. It doesn't have to be like this like social network and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of that's what I'm super excited about. But
that's cool. Yeah, it's almost like having a friend nearby who's already read the book that you can like set your book down and be like, hey, I'm processing this that just happened, or what's this character? What can you tell me about them? But it can work really well for fiction or nonfiction. That sounds really cool.
That would be the hope. We'll see how it goes.
Awesome.
But yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the questions. I'd like such a gift to be part of this.
Yeah, thank you. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. You can subscribe on all of the usual suspects, and I hope to catch you on the next one. But in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Wherever you are in your life and your work, I'm cheering you on.